Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting agenda for the Moyne Shire for Tuesday the 23rd of June, starting now at 2 p.m. at the Port Ferry Yacht Club, Port Ferry. First of all, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Recording of council meetings. Please note that today's meeting is being audio recorded. This recording will be uploaded to the council's website and will be accessible by the general public. While participating in and addressing those present at the meeting, you consent to any information you disclose, including any personal information or sensitive information being recorded and uploaded to the website, and it's also being live streamed. Will you please stand for the prayer? Almighty God, we humbly beseech your blessing on the council, direct and prosperous deliberations for the welfare of the people of the Moyne Shire. Amen. Apologies.
Yes, Mayor. Apology from Councillor Colin Ryan.
Thank you. Apologies for Councillor Ryan. Councillors or also have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the Building Council meeting held on the 26th of May and the special meeting on the 2nd of June be confirmed. I'll have a mover for that, please. Councillor Parker is the mover, seconded by Councillor North. Councillor Parker.
With one slight alteration, please, from the 26th of May meeting, item 7, it should read Taylor's Road rather than Mills Road.
Thank you.
Other than that,
Recorded. No. Councillor North.
Nothing to add.
Hearing other councillors' comments? Councillor Parker.
nothing to
All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Public participation today. We have two sets of participants addressing council today. We'll start off with Mr. Neil Blaine, please. Welcome, Neil.
Good afternoon, councillors. I attend today's council meeting to advise that I've not yet received a response to the questions I asked in the last council meeting regarding Mortlake South Wind Farm and a potential conflict of interest for Moyne Shire councillors and staff in accepting $200,000 to fund a Moyne Shire staff position. I note that the detailed responses from Moyne have been provided to other submissions, and these are included in the agenda publicly circulated last week. Today's meeting agenda states that appendices 11 and 14 relate to my submission, yet these appendices have not been included in a publicly available agenda. Can Moyne Shire please provide both appendices to me as soon as possible? Further to my questions from last meeting, I have, in fact, actually already received an answer to one of my questions from an unexpected source. The recent Warrnambool Standard article from Saturday the 13th of June 2020, titled "Wind Farm Funded Council Job Raises Angst," includes a comment from an Acciona representative that says the role, first flagged with the council in February 2018, was not related to wind farms. By coincidence, the 2017 Victorian Renewable Energy Target reverse auction closed in February 2018. Mortlake South Wind Farm was announced as a successful project by Daniel Andrews in September 2018. Moyne Shire knew that it was the responsible authority for enforcement of the permit for the Mortlake South Wind Farm well before the VRET reverse auction occurred. Was the reason for contact in February 2018 to ask for Moyne Shire to put in a submission in support of the project as part of the VRET reverse auction process? Did Moyne Shire councillors, staff, or the previous CEO take an active role in supporting the Mortlake South Wind Farm's VRET application in 2018? Did Moyne Shire advocate for the success of the Mortlake South Wind Farm bid because it already knew that it would receive the $200,000 for the funding of a staff position? If Moyne Shire has supported the VRET bid in an expectation of receiving Acciona funding if it was successful, I believe that this indicates a conflict of interest possibly existed as far back as early 2018. If true, it also debunks the Moyne response that there is not a conflict of interest now, as the decision hasn't been made yet. If Moyne Shire supported Acciona's VRET bid back in 2018, the decision to accept the Acciona funding was already made. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Blaine. Do we have any questions for Mr. Blaine on any of his comments today? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions to our CEO, just regarding Mr. Blaine's comments about response and when that will be.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Regarding the attachments 11 and 14, I think, in relation to the report, we'll ensure those are made available as soon as we conclude. And in relation to the other matters raised, I would take that on notice. In essence, the purpose of the budget submission that Mr. Blaine made at the last meeting and the set of questions that were raised, reported on tonight, discussed at the council meeting as part of the financial report, and as advised at the last meeting, there would be a response following that, following the adoption of the budget. Perhaps Mr. Ledden could confirm the timing around responses for submitters post today.
Yep.
Mr. Ledden.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, so in the council agenda today, attachment 14 includes the responses from the officer. So once the budget submissions report is endorsed by council today, responses will go to all of the budget submitters.
Thank you. Councillor Dukas.
So why aren't those responses in the proper attachments that go to the public?
Mr.
Through you,
Ledden.
Mayor. I might ask Ms Cook if they're...
Attachments don't usually, they are public documents, but they're not usually on our website at the moment. But if anyone requests, they can have them.
Yep.
Not a problem.
And through you, Mayor, that's all attachments, not just this one. So
No,
that's
all-
been practiced,
all
but
attachments,
yeah, but
all documents.
So,
Councillor Dukas.
yeah, well, I don't think that's acceptable. How is a person out there to know that they have to ask for the attachment? There's nothing in this document that says that if, attachments will be provided on request.
through you, Mayor, I think we
Yep.
take that on notice and I think it's a reasonable request to amend our practice.
Thank you.
Because I would even debate if it's an attachment. I thought it'd be a report, a response to the questions, and it'd be in the body of the report. I don't see it as an actual attachment.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Any other questions for Mr. Blaine on his presentation? Councillor Dukas.
Mr. Brain, this position, you've studied carefully, do you believe the Shire should accept the money and put it towards that position, or do we not hand it back and say, let's give it no thanks?
In my opinion, based on the information that I've given today, I don't think Moyne Shire should accept the position, because the responsibility is for being the responsible authority to enforce the permit existed first.
Right.
Mr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to clarify with councillors that a report on that matter, including draft memorandum, position description, bearing in mind that council still hasn't made a decision about accepting this offer or otherwise, and I expect that at this stage reported to a workshop and into the July council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Mayor. Would you see it being a conflict of interest if the proposed employee was in a completely different department than planning or environment? If they were in,
Well, I think in any circumstance there would be a conflict of interest, to be perfectly honest. I would put as a response to your question that if the employee was actually in an enforcement role that was enforcing the planning permit for Moyne Council, that would be probably still a conflict, but I would find that more acceptable.
Follow up,
sorry,
Councillor Lockett.
but in a completely separate area to planning or environment, would you still see it?
In my opinion, I think the conflict still exists because dating back to this 2018, coincidence of events, if they actually could cast a shadow on the independence of Moyne Shire to enforce the planning permit because it's gone into bat for a project with the knowledge that looks as though it had the knowledge before the decision was actually made. So you could argue that it's supporting the success of the BBET application in order to get its money.
Thank you. No further questions? Thanks very much, Mr. Blaine, for the presentation. Thank you. Our second presenters today, Mr. Tim Shrama and Co, regarding a planning permit at Rosemount Road, Updirk. Welcome, Tim and Steve. As you know, 5 minutes to present to council and take some questions after that. Thanks.
Thanks for your time today and for able to present my case for hopefully an approval on my or our block land out at Rosemount Road. I gather you've all read the proposal on what we want to do in the little venture that we've entered into a little while ago that we're now starting to outgrow and looking to expand. So we're rearing calves and have been for a little while now. We have my parents' property in Croyd, but Croyd is a booming little place, and where they are is, they've got a lot of new neighbours moving into the area and a few new dwellings and that around them. So we're looking to expand and get out on the block land so we're not sort of a nuisance in the town zone itself, because they are virtually in the 60k zones in Croyd. So it's been a long time coming for us to get to this stage, but we're haven't always been in the position that we're into to move forward and go ahead the way we look to go. So I don't know what else I can elaborate on. Is there any questions you'd like to ask me further from the report that we've submitted?
Thanks, Tim. Any questions? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Tim, and thanks for hosting us last week for a viewing of the property. Could you just give us a bit of an idea how many calves you expect in a year to raise on the property, and where do the calves go from once you rear them? Could you just give us a bit of an idea of the total numbers and whether you're holding them on? Or
yes. Yeah, to start with, the aim would be to rear in the vicinity of 35 to start with in the first 12 months, and they would be carried over into the 18-month period. In that case, we get a 6-month reprieve on the property, so we have small animals coming on every 12 months, and then the larger animals will be sold on market, buyers, that type of thing at the 18-month mark. So then we have that 6 months reprieve before we restock. At this stage, we're looking at 35 because it'll give us every 12 months, that'll be a new 35. So at the 18-month period, we'll have 70 on the 52 acres. but they're not always going to be big animals on 52 acres.
Right, thank you.
And so once they get to the 18 month or thereabouts, then they'll be off the market or to wherever.
And just another question, thanks.
Yep, Councillor Smith.
Are you rearing heifers, steers, bulls?
Steer, bull calves,
Bull
and
calves.
they will be, or they're nearly due to be, first lot are nearly due to be marked shortly.
Right. Thank you.
No worries.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Just background-wise, how long has the family owned this particular property?
I've had the possession of the property since 2007, March 2007.
Yep.
We have, so the land is currently leased by a dairy farmer next door, the Hines family. And they've had the property, and before that it was the Lumsdens that milked on the farm before them.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicants? No? All right, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll be dealing with the matter shortly, so you're welcome to stay back there and view. Right, yeah, that concludes our public participation in today's meeting. Move on to Councillor Parker.
Could I move that we suspend standing orders to deal with planning matter item 10 immediately?
Seconder for that? Councillor Lockett. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 10 will be dealt with now. And we'll throw to Miss Granger for that, please. Planning permit for 85 Rosemount Road, Yarp Turk.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an application, as you've just heard, for a dwelling in the farming zone to support an agricultural use that doesn't need a permit in its own right. The land has an area of just over 20 hectares, and the assessment in the farming zone is always balancing the competing objectives of allowing people to continue to farm the land and some housing options. In this case, Council has taken a new step of advising or referring the application to Department of Agriculture, who have a new Agricultural Advisory Committee, and received their comments that support this application. With all applications of this nature, for many years, Council's looked at how do you balance the competing and objective demands of the farming zone, and has usually put conditions requiring Section 173 agreements, which acknowledge that you may from time to time be subject to nuisance from nearby farming activities, to prohibit further subdivision or excision of the dwelling that's approved, and to ensure that the dwelling is aligned with the farm management plan. The advisory committee from AgVic has supported and actually recommended some of those recommendations. This has been considered as a genuine farming activity, and this is what the officers have recommended approval of the dwelling.
Thanks, Ms Granger. Do we have any questions first?
There is none.
No, we have a mover for the motion. Councillor Dukas is the mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, very happy to move this recommendation to grant a permit, as you've heard from Miss Granger, Mrs Gramer. We've been on site. It's a business enterprise that's going, I won't say gangbusters, but it's very popular throughout the North Shire. I mean, rearing young cattle, whether they be Frisian heifers, Frisian bulls, or even Frisian steers, for the local market, for midfield, or for the export market. It's great for the Shire because it will get us a house worth X amount of dollars with sheds and improvements, upgo the rates, without us having to increase the percentage of our rate increase. So the more houses and sheds and small operations like this, it's great for the rural economy, and it's my pleasure to endorse this recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I also like to speak in favour of the motion. Look, I think it's just development moving the area forward, and I'm very keen on seeing the value adding of young calves moving further on in the industry. I think it's a hell of a waste having those young cattle going off and slaughtered in the very early days of their life. And I think any farming opportunity to increase the productivity of the region and support the Meatworks and other businesses in the area. I've got great pleasure in supporting it. Section 173 covers the property. There's quite a comprehensive list of conditions, which I think are all very reasonable, and so I've got pleasure in supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors speaking to the motion? Councillor Dukas, in summary.
No need, Mr Mayor.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Sorry? Oh yes, resume standing orders, sorry.
Motion to resume standing orders. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Seconded was Councillor Wolf.
Thank you.
Resume standing orders, so we'll go back to item 1 on the agenda, the monthly financial performance report, to be presented by the Director of Community and Corporate Services, Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. This financial report, councillors, compares our actual performance to budget for the 11 months of the financial year, so from 1st of July last year around to the end of May this year. So getting to the end of the financial year, our operational position, our $40 million budget, is still favourable. As we've mentioned before, COVID has impacted caravan parks and childcare. It is looking as though the impact will be less than anticipated, and I think that's on the back of some strong performance in our caravan parks across the summer period prior to COVID, so I think that's pleasing to note. Our operating grants are showing favourable to budget. That's mainly due to the Grants Commission allocation for next year being brought forward to May this year. That's $4 million. So that was a government initiative to help cash flow for local government. So that's why that line item is very favourable. Our capital works program for the 11 months we've spent $17.1 million. We actually started out with an original budget of around $15 million. But with rollovers, carry forwards and additions throughout the year and new funded programs, that target is $26.7 million. So at the end of June, we'll no doubt have some rollovers, and we talked about a few of those major building projects are the main ones that will look like rolling forward. We keep talking about the Portbury Bowls Club, one at Croyd, etc., the Garbach Hall, a few projects like that. And we have noted that to assist our finances, under the federal government's local roads and infrastructure allocation, councils received $2.7 million, and we'll touch on this in the budget papers, but that will fund some projects that would otherwise obviously not be funded. So I think that's a real bonus for the Shire, and there's a good mix of projects that will be funded right across the Shire under that program. Sport and Rec similar grants, $100,000 for ICT to support virtual meetings is available from the state government, and also some climate change money as well. So I think we've got a pretty extensive and full list of programs. The final item is the variations, and there's only one variation contained in this financial report. It's a $17,000 grant relating to the East Beach chip options. The grant was received last year, so the expenditure will be trimmed up accordingly this financial year. So it's a net nil, councillors, as far as that variation goes. So the recommendation there is to receive the May financial report, including the variation list, which is the one variation, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mr. Led. Do we have any questions on the finance report? Councillor Parker.
I have a couple. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the indicators on page 1, our net worth is actual, it shows us $10 million more than budgeted for this particular time of the year. I was just wondering, I noticed that the operating surplus is up about $9 million and the cash is certainly up about $6 million, so just wondering if we can explain that, please.
I'm through, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Parker, and I've got Mr. Ralston, our Finance Manager, here to help as well, but certainly part of that will be, given our favourable cash position, given we haven't spent all of our capital works program, will be one of the contributing factors, so that's why our balance sheet, therefore net worth, will be more favourable than budget. That will square up a little bit when the finance team do the end of year financial reports and take into account depreciation and things like that. Happy to add anything, Mr. Wilson?
And also includes the financial assistance grant, the prepayment of $4 million as well.
On page 38 of 845, so that's page 11 of the finance report. Notice that sustainability's year to date on the budget's only 36% and community and corporate is 42%. Considering we're at June now, what are the chances of that getting close to what we expect?
Through you, Mayor, good question. Fortunately, I would say that they are the smaller sums spent in those directorates. We're looking at $1 million is the annual budget for sustainable development. We've spent 400 year to date. So, and Mr. Wilson, I can't think of what those projects are. I'm sure some of that will roll forward. Similarly, in community and corporate, they're more projecty things rather than capital works, but I'm sure some of those will roll forward. But certainly, as you can see, the bulk of our spend is in infrastructure and assets, which is a $24 million target now. And as we keep saying, roads is a major component of that, which is generally always spent. So we'd expect a pretty good result there. But it will be mainly building and consultancy project type things that will roll forward, it looks like at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other questions for the finance report? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you. Mr. Len, on page 26, am I true in believing that the $12 million sum right at the bottom is the total of the carryovers? And they might be adjusted a little bit at the end of June, but that's the total of the carryovers for the last financial year.
Through you, Mayor, that would be correct, Mr. Wilson. So they're the items that were rolled forward from last year into this current financial year. So that's why our original $15 million budget is now like $27 million, because we've brought those unspent projects into this year. We'll get to the end of this year and we're shooting for $27 million. We're currently spent 17. If we spend 20, there's $6 million potentially that will roll forward into next year. So we're starting to reduce that lag, if you like, but that's...
So that 12 million is in that 27?
Correct. Yep.
Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, one more. On the same page, second from the top, a $61,000 increase in cost for Southern Park qualified. Can someone enlighten, because I don't think we've really briefed on that. If I remember correctly.
That would be for Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I have circulated explanation to councillors. I think it was started the COVID issue when we weren't meeting face to face. That open one was basically created by some issues with the septic system because of those faults. The initial system that was planned wasn't able to be achieved because of the high water table in the area, and we had to redesign and construct an alternative system.
Thank you. Any further questions on the finance
Yeah, well, on that,
Councillor
I
Dukas.
would have thought something that's going to cost us 60 grand. Initially, we would have, but we should have known that was an issue. Seems strange that we start a project and all of a sudden find that through surveying a little bit of this, a little bit of that was 60 over. I mean, would it be fair to assume that if it was done properly initially, we should have realised all that before we started?
Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yeah, definitely it wasn't a project that went smoothly, but by the time we actually found that the initial system wasn't going to work, the toilets were 90% built and we were waiting on a sewage system to actually service those facilities. So at that point it was too late to actually do anything but proceed, and which is why council were briefed about the matter.
Thanks, Mr. Greenberg. Councillor Parker.
Just one other question. Sorry, I forgot to ask it before. It's on page 13 of 54 of the finance report with the balance sheet. and it shows that borrowings as at May are negative. Could you please explain how a borrowing can be negative?
Through there, it's a very good question, because Mr. Ralston explained it to me as well, and he can explain it to Councillor Parker.
So this relates to the new accounting standard. So we've taken up with our leases that we now have to account for them on our balance sheet. So we didn't have a budget for that at the time. So we've been applying the new standard and treating it through the standard and applying the principal payments to the balance sheet, but there's no actual budget, so that's why it's appearing as negative. So that'll be rectified at 30 June as part of our annual statements.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions on the capital works part of the report? I'll ask a question. Mr. Ledden or Mr. Greenberger, page 45 of 54, Warrandoo Playground. Is there any update on the progress of that, please? Mr. Greenberger.
Yes, through you there. The playground is actually waiting for a scope of works from the committee. I understand the committee have been unable to meet for some time because of the COVID situation. I think they're now on track to start recommencing those discussions, so that project will be carried forward to the new financial year.
Thank you. Any further questions on the finance report? Councillor Parker?
I had that one. Thank you for asking that. I also had one on page 62 of the papers, so it would be on page 35, and that's to do with the waste infrastructure at the Gardens Caravan Park. I was just wondering what's being done about that. It says that the team commenced planning physical works were to start in April. I'm wondering whether they have or what the setup is.
I believe that would be a question for Mr. Greenberger.
Thanks, Mayor. It's actually probably a question for Director Davis, who's not with us today, so I'll take on notice and send out an email to all the councillors to let you know.
Thank you. No further questions? I'll seek a mover for the report. Councillor Parker is a mover, seconded by Councillor Lockett. Councillor Parker?
Every month we seem to be able to ask a number of very detailed questions on the report, and we always get believable answers for those questions. So I think our finances continue to be very well scrutinised by council and very well supported by the officers. So I have great pleasure in recommending the report to everyone.
Councillor Parker. Councillor Lockett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Parker's comments, but I do have some concerns that we have a lot of projects that are building up and banking up, and things aren't getting, not getting done. But that, it's a tricky one. It's no good having a fantastic budget with heaps of money left over if the projects aren't getting done. So I think Trevor will get cracking the whip, and we'll hopefully get things finished as in good time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other council wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Parker, in summary?
Nothing further.
All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Carried. Item 2 on the agenda, the budget 2020-2021 submissions, presented by Mr. Ledden again.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, you'll be familiar with the budget submissions. So, as part of the budget process, budget drafted, put out for public comment and submissions. We received 12 submissions, and we've added the caravan park issue raised by Councillor Parker, and number 14 is the Neil Brown submission with officer comments. So there's actually 14 attachments to this report. We heard from a number of the submitters at the special council meeting, and subsequently the submissions were discussed by council at the June workshop. As a result of that, each submission has a response outlined in the report, which will either adjust or not adjust the budget. I won't run through them individually, but as council has already discussed and has a position on those. I guess one of the fortunate things is that, as I mentioned before, the $2.7 million infrastructure funding, it's pleased to report that will fund some of these projects that we're going to miss out in the budget. A couple of footpaths in some of our towns are an example of those. So, Mayor, happy to take questions, but the recommendation is that the council determine on the submissions as per the summary response as outlined in the report, and that a letter of response be written to the authors of each submissions, thanking them.
Thanks, Mr. Lennon. Any questions? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if it's possible if Mr. Greenberg could explain about the Port Fairy Bicycle Action Group and the response there. I think there's a really good policy kind of response that we're doing there. Could you just illuminate that a little bit?
Through you, there's probably several layers to that response. One is around the physical works, which we're doing some work around investigating possible stenciling on some of the Port Fairy roads. So that's around the physical works. There's also a policy suggestion around when we're planning for projects is to ensure that we plan for bicycle infrastructure and use of infrastructure by bicycles. That's something that the planning department will work through in coming months, 12 months probably, to think about how we might better encourage people to use bicycles more often.
Councillor Lockett. Paul? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And is this something that we could look at rolling out across the Shire rather than just Port Fairy?
Through you, Mayor, I think one of the learnings out of this is that we did look at having a bicycle strategy for Port Fairy specifically as part of the budget process. That wasn't successful, which is the reason for the submission. But certainly, I think next year we could look at a Shire-wide bicycle strategy, which we have done previously. It's probably time to revisit again.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seek a mover for the motion. Moved by Councillor Lockett, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A step in the budget process and a very important step where the community can have any comments, and we welcome them all, and they've been fleshed out, and I think a really good, thorough and democratic process, and I'm happy with the results. And hopefully, if everyone isn't happy, that's, we'll explore those in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Oh, just briefly, part of the process, as Councillor Lockett mentioned, is the process with the submission nights where the groups come and address council. We get to ask questions, and what I found is they do learn from each other as success stories and pitfalls and so forth. So a very good process, and I think it thrashes it out, and it's left for us to determine very shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Any other councillors who should just speak to the motion? Councillor Lockett, in summary.
No further need. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 3, the budget report for 2020-2021. Mr. Lennon.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. So this report presents the budget for 2020-21 for final adoption. As you all know, the budget is a major responsibility of council, setting the budget for each year. It's a long process, so the process starts about 6 months ago when officers draft budgets, and about the time the draft budgets are ready to present to council, we call it COVID-19 hit. So what the council did at that time was give direction to reframe the budget based on a rate freeze. So rates and charges to be frozen for next financial year because of the impact to the community of COVID-19. So that was an early direction from council. The budget was reframed. In addition to that direction, council also wanted to generally freeze fees and charges, which has been achieved in this budget, and also to provide a number of relief measures to our communities, particularly to commercial lessees. But there are other economic stimulus supports that are also included in the budget. So once that was done, the budget came back to council and was put out for public submission. And as we've just mentioned, we received 12 submissions. They've been dealt with, and now the final budget comes back for adoption. It is worth noting that it's a $48.6 million budget. That's the business of council. It contains the continuation of all services that council provides right across all of our communities in Moore Shire. and it provides for an $18.1 million capital works program for next year. That'll be complemented by some of the funding programs that I mentioned earlier that have been provided by levels of government to support COVID recovery. As part of that $18.1 million program, $9.2 million will be invested in our road network. So I think that's significant, and our asset renewal will be catered for as part of that program. Climate change, economic development support, and other COVID recovery measures, as I mentioned, are included in the budget. So it's been a long process, councillors, in you drafting this budget, putting it out for comment, bringing it back, and we just dealt with those submissions. The recommendation, Mayor, is that the draft budget as attached, and it's in the model budget format, which is sometimes more difficult for the public to understand because it is a full set of accounting statements that are contained in the budget. But there's a lot of supporting information as well. So the recommendation is that the draft budget, with the incorporating the responses to the budget submissions, be adopted by council. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Ladden. Do we have any questions? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 29 of the budget, it gives a budget of, I think it's, just trying to find, 19 million for the staff for this year, or for the projected 2021 year. But if we look at our financial statements that we've gone through earlier in the meeting, on page 12 of the current financial statements, we've already spent that amount on our budget this year, on our staff this year, and yet the budget says this amount for next year, and it also incorporates, I think it's 5 or 6 more staff than we had last year. So how are we going to pay more staff with no more money? I'm just wondering how that's going to be worked out in the budget.
Mr. Ladden.
Through me. Thanks, Councillor Parker, and I might get Mr. Ralston to assist you as well, but certainly part of that, and that forecast is clearly out of date now, as you picked up, because in our 11-month report that we just considered, it's now around the 19 million. There's a number of reasons for that, one being that we use staff resources instead of contractors, so you'll note that in the 11-month report that materials and contractors, the next line down is quite underspent. That's part of it, but I might let Mr. Ralston also explain some of that difference.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the finance report, the May finance report includes our internal entries as well. So they're reversed out for our model statements. So there's about $1 million in that the May report that are reversed out for our annual financial statements, which includes so their internal sort of entries.
Clear as mud.
Sorry,
I don't understand that at all.
Through me, if I could just perhaps add to that, that brings us back to more of a cash position. Is that fair to say? True expense to the business. Yeah. So where we journal things internally, they're reversed. They're not true cash costs.
Councillor Parker.
I'm not an accountant. I'll just have to.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Mr. Ledden, please. On page 30 of 74, there's quite a large figure there, just 699,000 revenue in lieu of rates, 42.59% increase. Could you just explain what that figure is and how we arrived at it, the revenue in lieu of rates, please?
Through Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Smith. Revenue in lieu of rates is income from our renewable energy sources, mainly wind farms, Moorway Power Station. So the current year forecast is 1.64 million. Next year is 2.3 million. That increase, and later in the agenda tonight, we have one of those new wind farms coming on stream and a rates in lieu agreement with that. which is Dundonald, and Morlake South is also budgeted to come on stream in the 2021 financial year. So that difference is really those two additional wind farms. It's quite a significant source of income for council.
Thank you.
Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question is regarding caravan parks and the folk festival fees, and just some clarification there. I believe we have fleshed this about in previously, just regarding our changes or lack or no changes.
Through Mayor, I'll try and summarise as best I can, but after discussion and the presentation from the Folk Festival Committee and considering competitive neutrality matters, the draft budget was not amended, but the draft budget did include a no increase, but also the removal or alignment of car fee charges across the two parks. And in addition to that, Councillor Parker's matter was reducing the Fab 4 caravan park fees back to $2, not $5. But there was an off-peak introduced that stayed as per the draft budget. That's my recollection of the summary of those matters.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Len. Sticking to page 47, if we have no rate increases, why is there a rate increase?
Through you, Mayor. So,
On the right at the very bottom,
Councillor Dukas, the
cents in the dollar has changed. I would have thought if there's no rate increase, the cents in the dollar will be the same.
yeah, it's a very good question and a difficult one to explain. I think it's a really important one. So, Councillor Dukas, if we have an annual revaluation now,
Yes.
and we also have a total revenue to be derived from rates and charges that are subject to the rate cap. So what the rate collector does is say, rate base on rate base, there is a zero increase in total revenue, and then divides that revenue by the new capital improved value to determine the cents in the dollar. So if everything was exactly the same, and we didn't have any valuation changes, yes, it would be exactly the same. But because of the changes in valuation, that process is redone to work out what cents in the dollar we need off the new valuation base to generate the same amounts of rates. But also there are supplementary rates that do increase over and above last year's rate base.
So that supplementary is not in that table.
Correct.
So if we use the new rate value, which would be higher generally, generally, why would the rate, the cents in the dollar go up? Wouldn't the cents in the dollar go down? Or wouldn't the cents in the dollar be the same and we would still get an increase? But the cents in the dollar has changed.
Yep. Through me, I might have to take it on notice unless Mr. Ralston can help me.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor. So if you go down further to table on the same, or the next page, sorry, it's got the value of land, the total value of land. So the value of land has actually gone down as well, from 7.5 billion to 7.4 billion. So the actual value's gone down. So the rate in the dollar would naturally have to increase.
So the value of the land in the Shire has gone down?
Yeah.
You keep that bloke on now. So I should get a reduction in my rates?
Through Mayor, that's on average. And we're going to have a report coming into July, Mr. Russell, I think, on those valuation movements year on year, which will explain table 4.1.1F.
Yeah. I don't think we need, I mean, this is not the time and place, but maybe an explanation of one of the next 2 or 3 workshops would be good, because we will get asked questions out of this.
Yep, it's a good point. It's tricky to explain. The valuation impacts on cents in the dollar, therefore rates. So even though total rate revenue is not going up, some people's rates will go up, some people's rates will go down, depending on how they fare with the revaluation.
And the revaluation, sorry, but the revaluation from what Frank said is the value of Moonshire has gone down.
Slightly.
Slightly?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we were plenty the other way.
All right, thanks Councillor Lucas, Mr Ladden. We'll look forward to seeing that explanation in July workshop. Any further questions on the budget? Okay, so I'll seek a mover. Moved by Councillor Lockett, seconded by Councillor Parker. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have fleshed this out for many months and been through many democratic processes, as I've already alluded to earlier today. There's some fantastic initiatives, but as we know, and I was reading earlier today, that the first time in 3,000 years that they pulled Tutankhamun's tomb, they pulled him out of his tomb, and then COVID struck, so I think they should put Tutankhamun's grave back, because it's been a very, very interesting year, 2020 thus far, with droughts and bushfires and COVID-19, and to still have a strong, robust financial direction. The Shire should be congratulated. I think the team, with their advocacies and things that they do behind closed doors, are phenomenal. Congratulations. It's not simply today where we all agree on the budget. We have had many heated conversations in various rooms across the Shire and over Zoom the last few months. And I think as a team we've worked very cohesively to come up with a solid, robust financial direction, but also to have an amazing spread of capital works across the Shire. $9.2 million spent on roads. We often get, hard feedback about roads. We couldn't possibly be spending any more money on roads. I think we're doing excellent in that department. Many challenges across the operational with obviously COVID restrictions and things like that, but some fantastic new initiatives, climate emergency, climate change initiatives, $100,000 being spent there, new street sweep operations. I will let other councillors elaborate on the wonderful things which are occurring, but I commend the officers and the team, but also the councillors and the work that we've done over the last few months. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I believe we have in excess of 120 services across the Shire. So in order to create a comprehensive budget that covers all of those, I think is a mammoth task, and I think it has been done well and well done. And I'm quite in support of what Councillor Lockett has said in congratulating the staff on putting this budget forward and recommend it to everyone.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors wish to speak to the budget motion?
Yeah.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Clarification. The increase, I think it's 5 staff from last year to this year, or next year. Are they positions that were vacant and we hope to fill, or are they positions that were vacant and we hope filled?
Mr Ladden.
Through Mayor, Councillor Lucas, you might recall when we redrafted the budget, some of the savings we achieved were from the positions that aren't filled each year. We have 300 staff. At any point in time, there's a number of positions that aren't filled. So we took the opportunity to use some of those savings. But in the new budget, there are, I can't remember, Mr Ralston, a number of EFTs. A number of those are grant funded. Can you recall?
And some part-time.
And a couple of part-time positions. So there are 2 components to that, for sure.
Right, so are we full up? Have we filled positions that were vacant, say, within the last 5 months or 6 months?
Through Mayor, so recruitment was pretty much put on hold as we went into COVID, because again, to bring staff in, you need someone to train them, to induct them. We are now coming out the other end of that, so people might see a lot of job adverts as we've tried to backfill those positions. So there has been a backlog, we're not there yet. So there's a number of positions yet to be filled that are currently out in the marketplace.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? I'll make a comment. Look, I think it's considering the COVID interruption that we've had, to go on was to freeze all rates and charges rather than applying the 2% rate cap, which is a standard practice, totaling a saving of over $400,000 to ratepayers is a testament to how council officers and councillors have understood the situation right across the Shire and tried to help our ratepayers get through these tough times. Also, temporary waiver of commercial leases to Mornshire tenants, saving of $50,000 to help our small businesses that are renting Mornshire-owned buildings. Generally, there's been no increase in fees and charges as well, so another $50,000 saving to residents. And despite that, we've still been able to maintain a strong expenditure, including some new aspects to the operating budget. Facade upgrade streetscapes grant program of $50,000, which will go towards small businesses in our towns right across the Shire to improve their facades to generally brighten up the streetscapes of those towns, and also improve the aspect of their business as well. And a capital budget of $18 million, with 50% of that being spent on our roads, is a lot of money. Of course, there's still room to improve there, no doubt about it, but there's still a lot of money to be spent on our roads. We are a vast Shire, we do have a lot of roads to cover, and council are working on that, no doubt about it. Recreation is another important thing across the Shire. I think people understand that this year more than ever, without being able to participate in a lot of recreation activities, but still council have saw fit to fund DC Farron Oval lighting, East Fram Golf Club, and some Victoria Park in Croydon improvements. Also some parks and open spaces, playgrounds. So despite the tough conditions, I think very fair to our ratepayers, and also still being able to invest money in our Shire, and a lot of that, as we've spoken about before, we'll endeavour to use local contractors to make that money duplicate. So just like to add my congratulations to the finance team, who have done a great job over the last 5 to 6 months to put it together. It's certainly and also with Zoom meetings as well along the way, and I'd like to congratulate them. And I think the spot we're in now to be able to maintain a strong budget despite the tough year and no rate increases is also a bit of a testament to our previous financial management to lead us with some surpluses to cover that. So well done to the team. I'll throw back to Councillor Lockett as the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You stole some of my summary there. There were some excellent points, well covered. Again, congratulations to the finance team and to council, and commend the motion and the budget, and look forward to these projects being implemented and continuing. As Councillor Parker said, 120 services across the diverse Shire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, councillors. I'll put the 2020-2021 budget report to the vote, please. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 4, declarations of rates and charges, presented by Director of Community and Corporate Services, Mr. Lennon.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And just following on from the budget process, I think it was really important that Council made the decision to push on with the budget process. So in these really uncertain times, I think it's really important for our staff, for our communities, to have certainty around the budget. I know that local government of Victoria gave exemptions to extend the process, but I think Council should be commended in pushing on and having the budget adopted our supply board. This next report really is an outcome of the budget, councillors. After setting the budget, we need to set rates and charges to derive the revenues as set out in the budget. So it's pretty much a procedural motion to achieve the various rates and charges that are included in the budget, and they include waste charges, and the service area maps are included for those particular curbside collections as well. Happy to take questions. It's quite a detailed motion, but happy to take any questions, Mayor.
Questions for Mr. Lennon? Okay, I'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Wolf. as the mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, as Mr Ledden outlined, that the actual budget we've just adopted at the last recommendation relies on this document and the calculations within this, and vice versa. So one works with the other, they both must work together. It's outlined in there, the fees and charges as applicable. So I commend the recommendation to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Total sum of $23,864 raised through this with fees and charges. A good outcome, I think, that we've been able to keep a cap on the rates and keep things in a fairly reasonable way. So, yeah, I'd like to recommend the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Any other councillors speaking to the motion? Councillor Wolf, in summary.
You just may have noticed I spoke about the policy and how it works, but the grain farmer spoke about the money part. I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 5, Belfast Aquatics Funding Agreement for Mr Ledden again.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So each year, Council, the funding agreement for Belfast Aquatics comes before Council, and a report on the key performance indicators from that facility come forward as well. What this report says that the majority of those indicators have been met. Council has had some discussions in workshop around the sustainability of that operation. So what this report is recommending is that the annual funding agreement be agreed to and signed off for another 12 months. That incorporates $150,000 funding from Council to the service. But as you're aware, there are some building and maintenance issues also with the facility, which Council is also considering. So this is more of an operational matter, but the sustainability of the facility itself will be subject to further ongoing discussions with Council. I'm not going to take questions, Mayor, but the funding agreement is attached, and the response from the committee, the Belfast Aquatics Committee, and outlining some of their operating cost increases, etc., but also their KPIs, which a number of them have significant increases. But obviously, COVID has struck as well, and I'm not sure. I think it's opening soon again, but more than ever, all of these facilities are going to struggle to get re-established, and it will take some time. But happy to take questions. But the recommendation is that Council endorse the funding agreement for 2021.
Question from Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. How much do we spend on Mortlake, Hawkesdale and Macarthur outdoor pools? Annually?
Through Mayor, and we did have a chat at workshop, but I have to take on notice, but 70,000, Councillor Parker?
It's somewhere, I think it is,
For
somewhere
Mortlake?
in 70,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
As indication, I can't remember the other two, to be honest.
67 sort of is in my head.
Yep, for seasonal. This is year round.
Thank you.
But in that order.
So,
Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Lockett, did you talk about Hawkesdale?
I asked how much we spend annually, but not known. Council Parkers.
Hawkesdale, I know we spend on capital works, but don't they run their own show?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, and Councillor Parker, just remind me, but we contract YMCA at Macarthur and Mortlake.
Yes.
I think that contract, or the total cost of operating Mortlake, for instance, is around $70,000 per annum. But look, I can't recall the numbers, the actual cost at Hawkesdale and Macarthur.
Yeah, but Hawkesdale run their own, so we don't contract anybody there.
Correct.
Any other questions for Mr Ledden? Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. On page 32, Mr Ledden, I'm just quite concerned about the astronomical rise in the staff costs. from 17, 18, it looks as though it's gone from 80 or 90,000 to 19, 20, nearly 360,000, roughly 360,000, whereas the maintenance has gone down. I'm just wondering, has there been any discussion about the staff cost, which is a massive cost in the operations of the facility?
Through you, Mayor, I've just taken on notice, but I'm pretty sure, Councillor Smith, that part of that is taking a swim school in-house, away from contract, external contract, which will potentially be a significant source of revenue for the facility.
Right.
So I know that, I'm pretty sure that's one of those reasons why staff costs have gone up.
Yeah, because it's just a massive rise in the last, from 17, 18 to 19, 20. It's sort of nearly $300,000, so there must be some explanation. So if we could find out.
Through there, we'll take that on notice, but I'm sure there's a significant income stream with that as well.
Yeah, it must be something to offset. Thanks, Mr. Levy.
Councillor Parker.
Thanks, Mayor. With regards to the KPIs, you said, Mr. Levy, that some of them are quite large. I'm really concerned about the impact of COVID on those KPIs. What sort of thing has been built into the agreement as a result of that? You mentioned that we are going to look at the sustainability later on, but that's an added thing that concerns me greatly, that we expect the 3% etc. increase when the facility's not even open yet, and we don't really know when it will be. So are there any strategic plans in place, or are there any fallback plans if they can't meet their requirements?
Through you, Mayor, I think the short answer is no, and that we'll be having ongoing discussions with the group, because I don't think anyone knows what it's going to look like as they reopen, given the limitations, even given the announcements, at the state at the moment. We were looking at going from 20 to 50 people, for instance. That's been delayed. That will impact lots of facilities, including this one. So I think it is really important, Councillor Parker, that we're going to check in again with Council around not only the operations, but also the maintenance of the building as well.
Any further questions for Mr. Levy? I'll seek a mover for the motion. Councillor Lockett is the mover, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we were just discussing, a lot of difficult times with COVID-19 restrictions and loss of revenue. The pool is an excellent asset to the region, and I think they've done a fantastic job with sharpening up the business side of things. It's a regional service, as I said, lots of people, not just Port Fairy, Koroit, Yambuk, kind of Moyne residents use the service, and I think we should continue to support the Belfast Aquatic Centre going forward. We've got the excellent rehab facilities with the rolling ramp and things like that. There's a gym as well. It's not just the pool, there's many other things that you can do there. Run by a community-led team, which have been, they spent a long time raising money, but now running the service as well. I think they do a fantastic job, and Council's done a good job of, assisting recently. Look forward to continue supporting them and seek support of Council to do so. Thank you.
Councillor Lockett. Councillor Wolf.
I'll reserve, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Wolf.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. Most items covered by Councillor Lockett, but as a group, this organisation's really sort of stepped forward in the last few years. There was a full audit done on the operation and the building and so forth a few years ago at the request of Council, and KPIs were set, as Councillor Parker mentioned. They have met them, and they're really having a go. They've got other initiatives occurring with the swim school and so forth, but think it speaks for itself when between the period February 2019 to February 2020, they had 41,000 visits to that swim, to the pool. So it's not a dead duck in the water by any means, and by council continuing to support them through the next year or two with their initiatives, I'm sure they'll be striving ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Wood, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Wolf's comments. I think, yeah, as I said, they've been doing a fantastic job, and we look at the money which we spend in other pools, you know, around 70k in Moore Lake, and the other two, Hawkesdale and Macarthur, which are seasonal pools. If you know, double that, it's about the same amount. So I think, yeah, look forward to supporting them going forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lockett. Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carry 6-0. Item 6, Dundonald Wind Farm Rates Agreement. To be presented by Mr Lennon.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, as we mentioned before, the Dundonald Wind Farm is under construction, and as per the Electricity Industry Act, council strikes rates agreements with each of the renewable energy providers. So this agreement is attached. As the report sets out, the calculation is set out per that act, which provides for a base payment, which is currently $56,000, and a capacity payment. This is a 336 megawatt wind farm, so that translates to 429,000. So total annual rates in lieu payment of 485,000 for 5 years, which has been our standard. Probably the moot point and discussions have taken place between Ms Granger's team and finance and the developer around the operational date and therefore when do rates start. And I know that Councillor Smith has raised in the past that a number of turbines are spinning. We did get a very detailed response from the wind farm developer, which in essence says that they go through various stages of testing before they get final sign-off. And whilst they can generate revenue in that time, it's not guaranteed, and in fact sometimes, depending on wind speeds, I think Ms Granger, etc., can in fact be negative. There's no guarantee around that. So that has formed part of those discussions. And the ultimate sign-off by AMO, and therefore full operational date, is looking at the 14th of September, which is the basis of this agreement, Council. So I'm happy to take questions, but the recommendation is that after undergoing negotiations or discussions with the wind farm, that Council endorse the agreement and authorise the Mayor and Chief Executive to sign the civil rating agreement.
Thanks, Mr Ledden. Any questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor. Just a question, Mr Ledden. Does the community agreement, the community funds agreement, is that part of that, or is that a separate agreement outside the...
Through your Mayor, no, it's not part of this, is just the rating agreement. Just going to my concern.
Yeah, the community fund is a separate, it's outside the planning permit, outside the rating agreement, and something that they're working on at the moment.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr Ledden? I seek Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, thank you. To either Ms Granger or Mr Ledden, on page 3 of the payment agreement, item 4, payment calculation, it says a base payment of 40,000, but under this agreement it's 56,700. So how did we get to the 56?
Through your Mayor, so they are indexed, Councillor Dukas, and so from, I don't know what year this was introduced, but 40,000 would have been a number of years ago. So over the years, they're indexed.
So the base payment index generally. So this agreement, which is the same for all wind farms.
Correct.
So when this agreement first came into play, it's an automatic index, irrespective of if the wind farm is built or not built. The base payment automatically goes up.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. So given at the moment, it's 56, next year it will be higher, and so on. So depending
So
on
if it started,
the wind farms
say,
comes in
10
another 10
years
years.
ago, CPI for 10 years gets it up to 56.
Correct.
Any other questions? Councillor Parker?
Probably a cynical one, Mayor, but do we have any options of changing any of the things in the agreement anyway, or is it set by EMO or the state government or whoever sets them?
Mr. Ledden.
Through you, Mayor, whilst it is by negotiation, I think there's pretty good standard practice around the basis of the agreements. One of the issues that we need to be mindful of is in fact the whole way that renewable energy operators are in fact rated. And as I understand it, and I don't know in detail, but you know, they're obviously not rated on capital improved value. Will that ever happen, and would it be discounted heavily? Was something that I think has been raised. So for the minute, I think this is best practice, but it's something we need to be mindful of in the future.
Any further questions? All right.
Yep, so now one
Councillor
more,
Davis.
please. On page 4, under, what is it, item 4D, it says, if it operates less than 10% of the amount otherwise payable under clauses E, B and C, it will be reduced by 50%. So if its production is down 10%, we get a 50% reduction in rates. Is that the way it reads?
Through you, Mayor, no, so Councillor Dickinson, you raised it at a workshop, so we did check. So it's a standard clause, but it means that if they were operating at a total capacity of less than 10%, you know, they're only producing 9% out of their total capacity, for instance, they would get that reduction. Mr. Russell informs me that's never occurred, but it is standard in each of the clauses.
So what is their rated capacity?
Through you, Mayor, this one's 336 megawatts.
Yeah, but they don't produce 24/7, 7 days a week, do they? So they would have a figure that they would estimate they would produce per year.
Through you, Mayor, I'd have to take on notice unless Mr. Blanchard can help, but I don't know the answer.
We've taken on notice.
Yeah.
Because part 2 says if they lose between 10 and 20%, which is more, they shall be reduced by 25%.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, if they're operating at between 0 and 10% capacity, they get a 50% reduction. If they're operating between only 10% and 20% capacity, they get a 25% reduction. Above that, they pay the full rates.
So it's not from the full capacity back.
No, no.
It's from the
green
zero
rate.
base up.
Yep. Yep.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? Seek a mover for the motion. Councillor Smith is a mover, seconded by Councillor Parker. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd like to move this recommendation. It's in my patch. It's love them, I hate them. It's making quite a difference to our budget, $485,000. It's been quite a remarkable construction. I think the commenced construction after Easter last year when the road was completed in 2019, and in approximately 18 months they're looking to sign it off in September. So it is a major construction, and I look at it every day, and as the turbines are getting closer to home, they're getting quite formidable. It's having quite an impact on our budget, and it's, as I say, it's $485,000. A very complicated agreement. As Councillor Dukas has been asking some questions, but I'd like to move and recommend it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. It's an agreement that's basically set in stone by the government. I think we need to sign it so that we can get the rates.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors speak to the motion? Councillor Smith as a mover.
Nothing further to add. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 7, Community Satisfaction Survey, presented by the CEO, Mr. Millard.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm really pleased to bring this report for Council. You will have read, some reports around councils and releasing these results, so the full report's attached to the agenda. But I think generally there's 2 points I would make. One is that the majority of our service areas and overall performance and community satisfaction has really held its ground and in many areas has increased. And that's against a trend in local government where there's been significant decreases in satisfaction with council performance. So in regard to our group of councils, like large rural councils, we're performing very well and have consolidated gains made over the last couple of years. So it's really pleasing. It reflects well on the council generally and its decision-making practices, and it reflects really well on the way our staff go about delivery of their individual services. So, I'm very pleased with the result.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Any questions on any of the stats there? Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, each year this comes up, and the thing that is very dear to me is the sealed local roads and unsealed local roads. And these still are not attracting a lot of support from the outlying residents. I see the postcodes of Mortlake, Woolsthorpe and down Yambuck Way where the residents aren't rating it very well. And I'm just wondering, as a council, what can we do to try and address this? Because we're spending a lot of money, I think 9-point-something million on roads, but we're still not getting the satisfaction that the ratepayers and residents require. And it's been coming up each year, and we still don't seem to be making any headway on it. So I'm just wondering, as a council, could we look at it this year? Is our communications letting us down, that we aren't getting the message out what we're doing to our road network? I speak to our officers and they tell us what's getting done, and I'm very much in favour of what we're doing. We're attracting a lot of grants to get roads done, but there's still the underlying dissatisfaction from our ratepayers that their hopes and expectations aren't being met by the Moyne Shire.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. We'll get Mr. Millard to address that.
Thanks, Mayor, and it's a point well made, Councillor Smith. I think, what are we doing to counterbalance that view? Clearly, we've just adopted the budget with a really hefty effort in roads. Half our capital budget is going to be spent on roads and improvement. I think the other part is that we do wear some angst on behalf of other authorities who are also responsible for roads in our region. And if, for example, you pull up Woolsthorpe Hayward Road, which probably all councillors and myself get concerns about, particularly Mr. Greenberger, it's not one that we have fundamental responsibility for, even though we lobby hard on behalf of our residents. So some we wear, I think, is a residual and a bit of a carrying the can for other agencies. But on our own patch, I think we do need to continue to explain to our ratepayers the good work that we are doing through Mr. Greenberger's team.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Councillor Lockett with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Millard. Regarding the data which is collected, notice that we have quantitative data. Could it possibly be that we do some qualitative data to assess about the unsealed roads, what people are saying? Because I presume not many people drive down an unsealed road and go, that was a lovely unsealed road. Like, no one really, unsealed roads just aren't popular because they're unsealed. Is that the reason? Like, I think qualitative data, so people's comments about it, would be really helpful for us to find out why this feedback's always so low.
Through you, Mayor, again, Councillor Lockett, that's a fair point. Part of the survey does give the opportunity to draw some of those comments out, so you can see a bit of that in the report, but we haven't done specifically qualitative research on it.
Thank you.
Councillor Dukas.
One at the moment, one question. 3272, what area code's that one?
Mortlake.
Is that Mortlake? And 3284?
Port Ferry.
So they're the ones complaining the most.
Yeah.
Is that the way I read it?
Do you have any other questions, Councillor Dukas?
Sealed roads in Port Ferry. Maybe they should live out in the country for a while.
Okay, thanks Councillor Dukas. I'll ask for a mover to the motion. Mover by Councillor Dukas, seconded by Councillor Lockett. Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard what some councillors have said. I'll breeze through the report because at the end of the day, I'll be quite honest, and I don't take a lot of notice of these reports. I judge by myself. I get in the car with you and go for a drive. Admittedly, some roads could be improved, but I'm sure Mr. Greenberger will agree that he's doing his best. We've got a crew out there working all over the Shire. The Portland road's being rehabilitated. There's other roads around the Shire going the same way. We've got a lot of gravel roads. We can't get over them all. Maybe we should look at using a couple of contractors at certain times of the year to get the grading done on some of the gravel roads. But that's for a workshop discussion. But at the end of the day, it's a big Shire. Covers a lot of things like Port Ferry, which is a hub of the tourist industry. We've got Koroit, which is a growing town. You know, people in Koroit can see improvements. And I think, depending on who you get on the end of the phone, it's not a high number of people to be surveyed. You strike a couple of people in an area that have a bad experience, and it can blow the percentages right out of the water. I think we as councillors should be talking to the community ourselves and finding out exactly where the issues are. And I know from time to time, and in this report, we've got letters of thanks for the good work we've done. So let's not get hung up over a report that has a low number of participants and 2 or 3 people with a gripe, or the other way, 1 or 2 people that have had a good experience can lift it. So in moving this report, I take it for what it is, but to the officers, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. Let's keep pushing forward to do the best we can.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Focusing again on the positives, 73% for emergency and disaster management. That is a glowing number, so I'd like to highlight that. But also, enforcement of local laws, 67% of people thought that was really good. So, I've been to council before and got the parking ticket. I didn't respond to them with thanks for the parking ticket. Like, that's a pretty glowing number in itself. So I think there's some pretty fantastic statistics there. But again, we don't just want to gripe on about the positives. There's areas to improve on. But again, I'd like to focus, if we could, on some qualitative research to flesh out exactly what's going on there with sealed roads, because I don't think anyone loves an unsealed road. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Dukas is the mover.
No need, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. All right, we'll put item 7 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Move on to item 8, Council Plan Half-Yearly Status Report, presented by Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. The council plan is the council's highest level strategic document. This report measures a range of indicators for the half year, so we're a bit late getting in, Mayor, I have to say, and we'll be coming in after the end of the year with the full year results. But what it does remind us is that what we're trying to achieve in our performance in a range of areas, service use, service performance, service cost. So there's a number of those included in this report: schools, libraries, home care, etc. Community satisfaction results coming in, they'll be updated, so we just heard about that. Our financial sustainability, again, is reinforced through this status report, and our asset renewal, amongst other things, and project delivery. So it's a good indicator. It is a bit out of date now and will come in at year end, but it's a good reminder of what our council plan is setting out to achieve The Local Government Act also requires council to consider if it needs to change anything in the council plan each year. And I guess we're on the home straight, councillors, as far as this term of council is concerned. So it's not recommended that there be any adjustment at this point in time. Obviously, there'll be a new council plan with the new council. So happy to take questions there. The recommendation is that council note the half-yearly status report for the council plan and consider no significant changes to be made to it.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions, firstly? I'll seek a mover for the motion. Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. It's quite comprehensive when you go through the sources and the description of each report. I noticed that some were at 25% and I looked very carefully, but then noticed that it is a 4-year plan and it's some of them are just done annually, as Mr. Ledden said. So everything appears to be on target, and there's a lot of 100% through there showing that we've actually achieved what we'd set out to do. So I'm quite happy with looking at the process of the report, remembering that this is an annual report, but it's about a 4-year plan. So more than happy to, and I can't see any reason to change anything that's in there.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very comprehensive document, covering quite a large section of things from infrastructure, community, environment, livability, families, and coming towards the end of the 4-year period, and I think it's most of the parameters have been met, so I think I'm happy in seconding it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Parker, in summary.
Put to the vote.
Councillors, item 8 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 9, Planning and Environment Act, appointment and authorisations, presented by Ms Granger.
Council, this is a procedural report. So under the Planning and Environment Act, it's council that authorises officers to have the ability to enforce and seek compliance of matters under the Planning and Environment Act. With a number of staff changes, we thought it was appropriate to bring back not a list of just new staff, but to make sure all staff that need to be authorised are.
Thanks, Ms Granger. Any questions? Seek a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Dukas, seconded by Councillor Wolfe. Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Ms Granger highlighted, procedural motion, we've got to have those people in place to do their job properly. So put it to the vote.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Wolfe.
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing further, Councillor. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Nothing further, Councillor Dukas.
No, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour of item 9? Carried 6-0. Item 10 has been dealt with. Item 11, proposed sale of old Noranda netball/tennis courts, presented by the Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So this report's outlining the commencement of a process to sell the old Noranda netball tennis courts. Some councillors might remember that we did go through this process some years ago and then put the process on hold while the local cricket club evaluated whether they wanted the land. They've since moved their operation to the Port Campbell Recreation Reserve. So I think it's time to actually revisit the selling of this property. This report basically outlines the process that we need to go through in declaring it surplus to needs and advertising for submissions in relation to the intention to sell the land. You will note that there was already one submission relating to a resident suggesting that their family had donated the land to council previously, and council may want to consider donating it back. That can be considered as part of that submission process. But tonight's decision, Mayor, is to declare the site surplus to council's needs, and then start the process for submissions. After that submission process, we'll bring back another report to council. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Greenberg. Any questions on this one? All right, I'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Dukas is the mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Dukas.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Straightforward procedural matter, as outlined by Mr. Greenberger. We've had a few of these in the last few months. It'll be nice to see what happens with this parcel of land. I believe there's a little bit of interest in the community in that. I did ask about whether it could be sold with a planning permit, but apparently that's being preemptive, so, or not the right thing to do. Anyway, let's get the process underway and let's see how the community handles it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr Mayor. Very comprehensive document over such a small parcel of land. It's surplus for the council's need, and I think it's time to move forward and get it off the council's books, and if somebody else can make good use of it in the Naranda area, I think it'll be a good outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillor wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Dugas?
No need, Mr. Mayor.
Item 11, all those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 12, proposed sale of the Garbok Hall, presented by Mr. Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Similar to the last report, we're looking at starting the process to sell the old Garbok Hall. We were very pleased to receive a state government grant earlier this year to construct a new hall, and because of that, we're now looking at selling the existing facility. Similar to the last report, we're looking to declare the site surplus to council's needs and then start that submission process. And again, another report will come back to council in the future. Happy to take questions, man.
Any questions, Mr. Greenberger? Seek a mover, please. Councillor Dugas is the mover, seconded by Councillor Parker. Councillor Dugas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to the one we've just decided on, it's good to know that we've got a sizable donation from the government, and I'd like to thank them for that. The community's worked hard, and now it's all ahead full to come up with a design that they enjoy and like, something that will last for the next 100 years. It'll be great for the community. It won't be just a hall, it'll be a meeting place, and I believe something like a kinder or a child learning centre or a play group or something like that. Anyway, it'll be a multi-faceted building with multi-purpose uses, and it'll be great for the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Councillor Parker.
It's good to see that it's being sold in order to create a new facility for Garbok.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillor should comment on this motion? If not, we'll go back to Councillor Dugas as the mover.
No need, Mr. Mayor.
All right, councillors, voting on item 12. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 13, lease of the Peterborough Golf Club, presented by Mr. Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. This report relates to the lease of the Peterborough Golf Club. The Peterborough Golf Club's actually had tenure of this land since 2004, but they're looking for some security of tenure, which is why they wanted to go through this process of renewing their lease for another term of 21 years. This has been through a submission process as required by the department. There was no submissions received, so what we can now do is proceed for approval in principle from the department, and then once that ministerial approval is obtained, councillors are asked to authorise tonight the signing and sealing of the lease by the Chief Executive Officer. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Any questions for Mr. Greenberger? Yes, I have one. Mr. Greenberger, number 2 there on the officer's recommendation, third line, rental, it's $200 plus GSTs per annum with market reviews every 3 years. So those market reviews, do they come back to council for consideration every 3 years?
I take that on notice, Mayor. I think it's actually a process run by the department, but I'll confirm that and let you know.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Clarification,
Councillor
Mr.
Wood.
Mayor. To yourself, Mr. Millard, or Mr. Lennon, do I have to declare a conflict of interest because I hold the title well, between the four of us?
I think Councillor Wood will happy to let you go on that one.
Okay, thank you.
But yes, thanks for bringing that to light and my attention.
Thank you.
No further questions? Councillor Lockett and Dugas? Yeah.
I was going to speak in favour of the motion.
Okay. Councillor Dugas, question?
Clarification.
Yeah.
Will this golf club, it'll come under the native title restrictions that are currently being held on?
Mr Greenberg?
As it's Crown Land, I assume so, yeah.
All right, I'll seek a mover for the motion. Councillor Dukas moved, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Dukas?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. 90% of procedural motion, 10% one of, I suppose, enlightenment that we finally get this lease agreement in place. Will make all the people down at Peterborough happy, plus a hell of a lot of people that go down there to park. It's a very popular course. It's a very social type of atmosphere in the golf club. I don't know which holds the title, the people playing golf or the socialising, but either way, it's a great little course, a great little town, and now that this agreement's in place, they've got surety and they can go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this just gives them some certainty going forward for 21 years. It is situated on Crown land, and the council is the committee of management, so this agreement had to be worked out. Seems quite a modest sum, $200 a year, which is under a pot of beer a week, I suppose. If you look at it that way, you can ever buy beer at the club again with the lockdown. So it gives me pleasure in seconding this motion and giving the golf club some security going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors? Councillor Lockett?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's great to see that the paperwork is all on par and we can get the ball rolling with this one and tee off and get things underway. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Very good. Thanks, Councillor Lockett. No other councillors? Back to Councillor Dukas.
No need, Mr Mayor.
All right, to item 13 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 14, the Municipal Emergency Management Plan endorsement, presented by Mr Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The Municipal Emergency Management Plan, or MEP, as it's referred to, is needs to be in accordance with the Act, needs to be reviewed every 3 years. This report relates to that review. There's been, while the document is a liquid document, it's always under review and changes, and we've only got to take the current COVID-19 situation to understand why it's a liquid document and you need to change as time permits. There has been a number of changes made to the document following the last review. We've tried to take a fair bit of bulk out of the document by referring to links to other documents, but also just updating information around the history of emergency events, council staff, etc. The MEP has been reviewed by or audited by the appropriate authorities. It's been to the local committee who have recommended the council adopt it, which is the reason the report's provided tonight. It's a requirement of the Act that council actually do adopt it, so we're presenting it tonight for adoption there, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mr Greenberg. Any questions? Okay, so you can move it, please. Councillor Parker is the mover. Seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. As Mr Greenberger has already said, it's been audited by the Chief Officer, it's been approved by the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, so it's just a matter of formalities from here on.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Wolf?
Nothing to add to that, Mr Mayor.
Any other councillors wishing to make comment? Councillor Parker?
Put to the vote.
Councillors, item 14 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 15, Committees of Council. Woolsthorpe Wind Farm Committee, Woolsthorpe Wind Farm Community Engagement Committee, Community Representative Nominations, presented by Ms Granger.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, we've had a community engagement committee for the Woolsthorpe Wind Farm for some time, and the composition of that committee has 3 community members. One of those positions is currently vacant. The wind farm construction is imminent, and it's important to make sure we have a full complement on the CEC. We've followed process and gone out and given notice, and you have 2 nominations before you to consider filling the vacancy.
Okay, any questions for Ms Granger? I'll seek a mover with the nominated representative from Councillor Dukas.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, you want me to move?
Sorry? Yes. Were you?
Yes,
Yep.
definitely.
With the nominated representative?
Well, I don't have a part 2 to that recommendation. So I will nominate the representative.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll move. You want a seconder first? Anyway, I'll nominate before the seconder does in case they don't agree.
Yes.
Nominate, where's this young lady? Terry Barnes.
Thank you.
Ms. Terry Barnes.
Do we have a seconder?
Representative.
Seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Dukas to speak to that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, yes, it's good to have, to start 2 nominations, because, I mean, we've had a vacancy there for a while. We filled them finally, and then one person's up and left the district, so this other vacancy comes due. Ms. Barnes is well known in the community, a great community person, and it's good that someone like her can, or I should say, it's good that someone like her actually goes to the trouble to nominate, because she's a pretty busy lady, but then you want something done, give a busy person to do it. So I wish her well. I'll welcome her with open arms to the committee, and I'm sure that her input will be highly valued.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Wolf.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank both of the applicants for their interest in the position. I read both the applications, and my selection was also for Terry Barnes. She's, as per her application, she's in the general store there, in touch with every man and his dog on a day-to-day basis. So it's exactly what we need on the Community Engagement Committee to let people know what's happening from here. So thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wolf. Any other councillors speak to this motion? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In summary, I'd just like to congratulate Ms. Barnes, and I'd like to thank Mr. Lenihan for putting in his application. And I hope this doesn't discourage him from putting in other applications. Once the elections are done and dusted, all committee positions are made vacant, so there'll be an opportunity for him and anyone else for that matter to nominate for all the committees that Shire have. So if anyone that's listening and interested, keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. All right, councillors, item 15 to the vote, please. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 16, Assemblies of Councillors. Recommendation presented by Mr. Miller. Procedural. Any questions on that one? No? So you move for that one. Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker.
Proceed.
Councillor Smith. Nothing further? All right. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 7A, Mayor and Council's report. Any questions from anyone to anyone on any of those meetings had there? Listed there. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just regarding the Great South Coast Mayor's meeting, any updates on anything which occurred there and COVID restrictions, any type of discussion regarding that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Lockett. Yeah, it's probably fortnightly that we're meeting via Zoom, the 5 mayors across the Great South Coast. It's not a decision-making forum, just a forum to share information about what each council, how they're tackling the COVID situation, what measures put in place to try and, in particular, we've talked a lot about how to help our small businesses to get through it and recover out the other side. There's also been some discussions about when the time is right to attract visitors back to the area. So overall, it's been very worthy meetings, and as they're via Zoom, it's fairly convenient to meet for an hour and have a chat about COVID measures. Any other questions? Councillor Lockett?
The ComputerLink 1 June Share Your Care Champion briefing. Can you elaborate on that one, please?
Yes, Councillor Lockett. Yes, I was been asked to be a champion for Share Your Care campaign, which is not yet gone public or been launched, so there will be more information coming on that in July.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you, Chair. Any other questions, councillors? No? Okay. Item 18, councillor notice of motion. None present. Item 19, general matters. Any general matters for councillors or officers would like to raise? Councillor Wolf?
I'll just commend the staff right throughout the Shire on the publicity and keeping the public informed on the COVID issue, doing what they can. I think the feedback from the community is good on you. She's taken a leadership role and it's well done there. And one other matter is, and it did receive press, is Mr Tim Clean, so just so that it's on the record, his significant contribution to some works that are to occur in Mortlake may not have occurred had he had not stepped forward and provide some major earthworks to get a road done up and sealed and so forth. So it's, he did receive a lot of compliments on the media, but I think it's good that it's on record that he is acknowledged by us again. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Any other councillors with a general matter like to raise? Councillor Smith?
I've had a couple of comments that probably a positive thing in respect of road slashing up in our corner of the Shire. Big Roads have done quite a lot of work along the Hamilton Highway, working last week. They've slashed a lot of the corners and that, so going into the spring the grass is, and the Moyne Shire grader, the Moyne Shire slasher has been working up in our area. And a couple of comments on it that getting the grass cut, so hopefully it's just good to get positive feedback on what the Shire's doing, and some of it, we get plenty of negatives, but it's always good to get a positive both on big roads and the Shire.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors with the general matter to raise? Nothing further. Any officers like to raise the general matter? Thank you. Moving on to item 20, urgent business. Any councillors have any urgent business? Okay, I'd like to raise an urgent motion, but in order to do so, it's best practice that I vacate the chair, so I'll seek a motion to appoint a temporary chair. Councillor Smith?
I'd like to move that we suspend standing orders, and if Councillor Wolf could take the chair while we address this motion.
Do I have a seconder for that? Seconder for that? Councillor Parker, seconder? All those in favour? Carried 5-0 for the temporary chair. So hand over to Councillor Wolf.
Councillor Mead, the Mayor, has got an urgent motion, so what I'll do is get Councillor Mead to read his motion, and the first item for debate or discussion is it urgent and does it need to be determined at this meeting? If it's passed that it is urgent, then we deal with the actual motion itself. So, Councillor Mead, could you please read out your motion, please?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. The motion is that Council requests the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews to apply the retrospective restrictions announced on the 20th of June to the metropolitan area of Melbourne only, and that the easing of restrictions as intended to apply for the 22nd of June be put in place for rural Victoria.
So that is the motion. Does anyone want it read again, or is it the substance of it fairly clear? Do we have a seconder then to the motion, but to determine whether it's urgent business that needs to be dealt at tonight's meeting?
Do you want to move up to that?
A seconder?
Seconder, yeah, I'll second it.
All right, Councillor Dukas is seconder. So, Councillor Mead, in your opening, so to deal with the urgency of it only.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wolf. The reason for the urgency is that in order to help our small business right across the Shire of Moyne as soon as possible, as they were gearing up for 50 patrons, that was meant to be happening yesterday or Monday, ordering more food, more staff, etc. to cater for that, only to be pulled back to 20 on the 11th hour. Also, the reason for urgency is that it has to be brought to this meeting is because it was only announced on Sunday. To bring it up as a council notice of motion is a 7-day requirement, and I believe it is urgent that we help our small business open up to greater numbers as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. Councillor Dukas is the seconder to the urgency.
Yes, I can concur with the Mayor, Mr. Mead, and to get this on the agenda, it has to go through an emergency motion. I mean, we can't hold off for another month. It's been a month. Personally, I believe it's 6 weeks too late to open up businesses, and this is the only opportunity we've got to publicly put our stamp on our position and that of the whole community. People are just sick and tired of being told one thing today and another thing tomorrow. Things are getting desperate out there. Businesses are falling by the wayside and may never ever recover. So unless we make it known now, because I'm sure that down in Melbourne we are not being listened to. Councillor Mead is not the only one who's spoken about rural Victoria, rural regional Victoria, and the very low number of cases in that vicinity. And I think this is our only opportunity to make our thoughts known on behalf of not only the Moyne Shire and say South West Coast, but the Great South Coast area as well, and Victoria regionally as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas. Any other councillor wishing to speak for or against the reason for urgency? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. I'll speak against the urgency. I received an email 4 minutes ago with the motion. I understand Councillor Mead's comments about reacting to the recent changes, but we've had weekly briefings since COVID-19 started. Advice fed back from federal and state governments. We haven't been reactionary to any of the dramatic, draconian measures which we've welcomed at times. We haven't reacted at all. Yet, at the 11th hour, we're reacting to one of the restrictions which has occurred. By us reacting and saying we want to open things up again, could create a hotspot down here. There is already people flooding to tourist destinations in Port Fairy, Peterborough. There is already enough fear on the streets about it becoming a hotspot down here. People travelling from Melbourne and back. Melbourne is looking at 6 local electorates, 6 local government areas going into a lockdown. 1 million people going into a lockdown in Melbourne. For us to try and open up the doors down here would be ridiculous and dangerous, and I do not support it. We haven't even discussed it prior to this meeting, so I understand you're saying it's urgent, but I think it's urgent to not do this motion at the last without any discussion, any feedback from Department of Human Services. Today I phoned someone that works for the Department of Human Services. They said it would be a ludicrous thing to do. So I'm alluding against the urgency, but I'd strongly speak against the urgency of doing this.
Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Any other councillor wishing to speak for or against the reason for urgency? No. Councillor Mead, as a mover for the urgency.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wolf. Look, I've highlighted the reasons why it's urgent. Businesses still got bills coming in, not allowed to have enough patrons to cover, and this, to revert back to the easing of restrictions that was planned, will certainly help ease some of that, and that is why it is urgent that we act for our businesses now.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. So, councillors, we're now about to vote on urgency, the need for the urgency of the motion, not the motion itself, so that we can then debate the motion itself. So those in favour that the matter is urgent and should be dealt with tonight is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against is 1. Councillor Lockett. So the matter is deemed urgent. So Councillor Mead will now deal with your motion. Could you just read the motion again, please, and we'll get a seconder for the motion and debate that.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Wolf. The Council requests the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews to apply the retrospective restrictions announced on the 20th of June to the metropolitan area of Melbourne only, and that the easing of restrictions as intended to apply for 22nd of June be put in place for rural Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. So that's the motion that we're now to discuss and debate. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Dukas is the seconder. Councillor Mead is the mover.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wolf. Well, look, some of the points I've already raised in the reason for urgency, but just to add to that, it's unfortunate that the poor behaviours of a few in metropolitan Melbourne disadvantages the rest of rural Victoria that have done such a great job, as Councillor Lockett highlighted, such a great job since the COVID restrictions were announced. There's been no cases in southwest Victoria for over 12 weeks now. As I've said, businesses have geared up and ready to go from 20 to 50. Whilst it's a shame they can't do that now, hopefully Premier Andrews may see fit to show some credence to this motion if it's successful. But also it's about opening rural Victoria for rural Victoria. The motion says that the retrospective restrictions announced on the 20th of June, which includes staying within your own LGA for those, is intended for the Melbourne area only, as the motion states. So if they follow those restrictions, then this area will not be flooded with people from outside the area. It's about opening rural Victoria for rural Victorians, so we can travel to support businesses right across Victoria, but in particular here in Moyne, to help them get back on their feet and get through this time through no fault of their own. They've suffered, dire financial consequences. So for them to open up as soon as possible is the reason for this urgent motion that I put to you tonight, that Moyne supports our small business.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. Councillor Dukas as the seconder.
I'll reserve, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors speaking for or against the motion?
Point of clarification.
Councillor Parker.
If I may. Does the motion actually, I don't know that by reading the motion, I feel that it does include those metropolitan councils having to stay in their own area. I'm not sure whether it's specific enough. Is there a
Can I answer that?
Councillor Mead.
So as part of the Premier Andrews' recommendations was that those LGAs do not go outside that, and that's that's where it's referred to apply the retrospective restrictions. And I've gone on to say that it should be for metropolitan and Melbourne only. So I feel it does cover those points.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Smith, did you have
Councillor
something?
Parker, but the question was similar to mine.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor
Yeah, just
Lockett.
a point of clarification. So you're suggesting all Melbourne goes into lockdown?
I'm suggesting that the Melbourne follows
the other restrictions.
Yeah, Premier Andrews restrictions.
And how would you restrict people coming here?
Well, once again, it's been a recommendation all the way through, and now, once again, it's a strong recommendation, but there are no legalities in place. We just ask people to follow those recommendations.
About getting
Yeah.
coming here? But they are. Okay.
Councillor Smith, did you have anything further?
No.
No. Look, I'll just make a very brief comment on it, and it's interesting that today, coming down on ABC radio, they were talking. They interviewed a proprietor from a bakery at Apollo Bay, and the proprietor from a caravan park at Halls Gap, and different locations, different stories, but basically one of them said, I couldn't go through this again, the flip-flopping, either mentally or financially. It's just put us in a tumble dryer at the moment with what's happened, and we're welcoming people. I think everyone was aware of the risk of a second wave. Hopefully people have learned from it throughout the state and the nation even, and we'll be wiser and smarter. People are going to come here anyway, but give the businesses an opportunity to recover somewhat. So I'll leave my speech at that. If no one else, so Councillor, did you want to speak for or against?
Yes, please.
Yep, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wolf. Yes, I wish to speak strongly against the motion. I absolutely feel for the businesses in this town, in this district, in this region, in this state, in this country, in this world. This is nothing that has ever been before us as a human race that we're experiencing at the moment. With international travel, the virus has been killing hundreds of thousands of people globally. Yes, Australia has done reasonably well, but not as well as, say, New Zealand or things like that, because they went out hard and locked down and they've moved through it. The longer in Victoria the people don't adhere to social distancing and the measures which prevent the spread of the virus, the longer this will drag out. They're talking about if we go back to a second stage of restrictions, that would cost the Victorian economy $9 billion. So if we're discussing now about come on down, welcome things, open up businesses, it could draw out the process and take longer to recover. Victoria has had double-digit figures 7 days in a row. There's a second wave. It's still a lot smaller than it has been, but it's occurring in Melbourne, absolutely. There hasn't been a case down here in 12 weeks. We know that because everyone's been doing the right thing. There hasn't been a community transfer down here yet. If that occurs and we have less restrictions, a disaster, an absolute disaster, and people's lives are at stake. Whose lives are at stake? The elderly, the vulnerable, people with comorbidities, Indigenous populations. There is a plethora of reasons why not to do it, and I think this is one of the most ludicrous things which has come up at council since I've been involved in council, and I think it is a possible disaster. I mean, the point will be probably mute, and Andrews probably won't even see our letter. He's got plenty of things on the go. The restrictions going backwards and forwards. No one wants further restrictions. We've been in lockdown for, 3-4 months? Everyone's sick of it. Everyone's loosened up on hand gel and distancing, and it's a bit of a joke. It's far from a joke. The last thing we want is it to increase in a second wave and to welcome people down here. 2 schools in Melbourne have been shut down in the last 12 hours because it's still spreading. The virus doesn't go, oh, I won't go here, I won't go there. I think it's a very irresponsible thing, and I beg of residents to still keep doing social distancing, to keep hand hygiene, to support local businesses absolutely as much as you can. This is probably an unpopular thing for me to say, but I think it's the whole time this COVID-19 restrictions and the pandemic has occurred, we've been following advice of the Chief Medical Officer. We've been following advice from federal government, from state government. Why would we now go, nah, come down here and shop? Like, it's the last thing we want to do. We need to hold the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Duke, is you reserved?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll be brief. Private enterprise, mum and dad businesses, it's time we looked after them. I've heard what Councillor Lockett said, but if a rational person was to get the figures and have a look at what this virus has done, they'll find that although it's a contagious virus, the deaths are very, very low, especially compared to other diseases. There's been no study done on how it's affected small business, how it's affected people mentally, socially, financially, and that has to be taken into account. There has to become a day of judgment. If you think you're going to suffer from the virus if you catch it, stay indoors. Talk about people coming down here. If the metropolitan area is locked down, as Daniel Andrews supposedly hopes will happen, then those people shouldn't leave their homes. There's enough people in rural Victoria to help the businesses survive. I'm just imploring people, look behind the news, get the figures, get a pen and paper and look at exactly what's going on. We had Cedar Meats, there was 111, I think it was, tested positive. Those people have been working side by side for months. How many of them ended up in hospital? How many of them died? They're still working happily away. Let's not forget that if the economy falls in a heap, there'll be no money to prop up social services. All those public servants that are getting their pay now, still going to work, whether it's at home or in an office, getting extremely well paid. It's all right for them to say, please don't stop opening the doors, or as Councillor Lockett said, opening the doors and let the pandemic run riot. It's all right for them, because they're doing it. Warrnambool's still busy. I know people in the trades industry, they're all going to work. They're all the tradesmen are working side by side, and there's still no virus. Still no one testing positive. So let's open our mind up to what exactly is going on here and give the rural community a chance to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Mead, as the mover.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wolf. Just a quick reply to Councillor Lockett. Yeah, the email was sent not long ago, just so it could be in front of you, but it was discussed with all councillors earlier today. So there was some pre-warning. Also, you mentioned about Victoria having double-digit figures. That is true, but they're all within Melbourne. Hence the reason for rural Victoria mentioned in the motion. And you mentioned disaster to pass this motion. I actually personally see it the other way. It'd be a disaster for businesses to go broke and close across the Shire, small businesses. Some of them that were really hedging on having increased patronage, only to be reversed because of some of Melbourne's poor behaviour. So I see that as a real disaster. Our small businesses across the Shire being detrimentally affected by Melbourne's behaviour. So I urge councillors to support our local Moyne businesses and support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mead. Councillors will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of Councillor Mead's? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? There's one. Councillor Lockett. The motion is successful. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf. Do we have a motion to get back? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I'd like to move that we suspend standing orders and resume.
Sack me.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf, for standing in. We'll move on to item 21 on the agenda, CEO meeting schedule and activities report. Mr. Millard, any comments to add to that?
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to take questions on any of those meetings or the activities report generally, but if I could just make a couple of comments. The past few months, including the past month, I would just like to recognise the good work of our teams generally. Business has been carrying on as best we can, often in different ways. In the activities report this month, I wrote a small column on Zoom or Doom and the amount of activity that's just carrying on in a different way. And while it's not what we prefer, it's enabled us to adapt and be nimble and continue really good set of service work. I would also recognise the finance team in particular over the past 2 or 3 months in adapting so quickly and bringing forward the budget which councillors were able to adopt tonight and meeting our original timeframes on that rather than defer that. And I'd also like to just compliment the management team directly. They're all trying to manage services, from different locations, smaller locations. The restrictions, for example, on Port Fairy and Mortlake mean, in Port Fairy, for instance, where we would normally have, say, around 60 staff, we can only actually fit about 20. So we can't bring those people back even if we wanted to while those restrictions are in place. And we are certainly receiving requests from some staff that they really feel that they would be more productive if they came back to work. So where we can, we're trying to meet some of those needs, but it is a very difficult circumstance and a bit of a moving feast. So I'll leave it at that, Mayor. Happy to take questions on any of those meetings, as I said.
Councillor Smith with the question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Millard, on the 20th of May, by computer link, a meeting with John Brinford, CEO, Craig Knight, CMA. I'm just wondering, was the mouth of the Curtis River discussed at all, or was there any discussion or intended discussion on the opening of the process of opening the Curtis River at Peterborough?
Mr Millard.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Smith. Yes, Mr Greenberger and I spoke with John on general matters around the opening at Peterborough, the Curtis, and one of the reasons for that discussion was obviously there was quite a bit of angst around the most recent opening. He reinforced the triggers that they see and the process they see involved, but he did also alert us to the fact that he was intending some more consultation once he was able to meet more freely with people. And I think Mr Greenberger and I may have even offered the Mayor as a possible chair of a community meeting to discuss those processes.
Thank you, Mr Chair.
Any other questions on the meeting schedule? Mr Millard, question on the biannual meeting with the Department of Transport and the outcomes of that for mine.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, that's one where Mr Greenberger and myself have a broader discussion with senior staff, including the Regional Director in the roads space. We were able to raise ongoing issues. Mr Greenberger raised some quite operational issues, contract issues, etc. But it's an opportunity for us to speak directly to senior leadership in Rural Roads Victoria.
Thanks, Mr Millard. And a further question, the Great South Coast Regional Partnership Roundtable. What was discussed there in light of the COVID situation?
Again, Mayor, that's the Great South Coast Partnership. A range of private individuals and bureaucrats. That was a broad roundtable chaired by Lisa Dwyer, who's the chair of the partnership, and really taking advice from all corners about impacts of COVID-19, particularly on business and activity. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Mr Millard. Any further questions on the meeting schedule? Do you have any questions on the activities report? Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr CEO. The Macarthur Wind Farm. It's got here, there's an updated environmental management plan. It's been submitted for review. Can we get a copy of that, please?
Mr Millard.
Perhaps Ms Granger might respond just to the current status of that plan.
Yeah, I can run a circulation of that report.
Thank you. And on Macarthur, Macarthur's recently has paid out millions of dollars in compensation. They've actually bought a farm off the gardeners, paid compensation there, plus compensation to other local landowners for various things. Does that then leave us open to being sued by them because we've endorsed their plan, the permit, saying that everything's all right?
Through you, Mayor, I'd take that on notice. Mayor, I couldn't possibly answer that in an open forum.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for the activities report?
Yeah, I've got...
Councillor Dugas.
Back on to Morton's Lane. It's an ongoing issue. Nothing's happened. I think we were promised action months ago.
Ms Granger. Ms Granger, do you have an update on that one, please?
I can't give you a specific at the moment.
But you can take these on notice, shall if you wish. Sorry, Ms Granger. Yeah, don't expect there will be answers today. The Salt Creek one, we've got those reports. that were handed out a month or so ago. I think it's table 2 on page 12. Could you check the date? It's got 2019 on it. Should it be 2018? Because if it's 19, what happened to the 18 report?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, and the second report should be due next month, I believe. And the Dundonald Wind Farm, Mr. Millard, you were going to get someone to investigate the native veg removal, etc. I think you were going to get them to do it, but I thought it might be better if someone else did it, except getting the bank rubber to check the bank hole. So you got an answer for that, or are we going to take it on notice?
Through the Mayor, it's probably best to take that on notice, provide the advice, and we do have our next workshop a plan to go into that Salt Creek and others in a bit more detail.
And the other one was the Hawkstone and Ryan's Corner. There's been company people talking to local landowners, etc. I believe their permit runs out sometime this year. Have we written to the planning minister expressing our view to have input in that process, whether he renews their permit or extends it or whatever he does?
Perhaps Ms Granger?
Ms Granger.
Yeah, so both those permits are due to expire in August, and council probably about a year ago wrote to the minister saying we're interested in having some input into whether or not those permits are extended.
Right, so have we got a response from the minister on that?
Only that he hadn't received a request as yet.
Right.
Anything further, Councillor Dugas?
No, I reckon that should be just about cover it.
Any other councillors with questions for the CEO on the activities report? No, in that case,
Oh, sorry, there's one that...
Councillor Dugas has snuck in again.
Yeah, no, it's not in here, but we asked Mr Davis to look into the new rules concerning quarries. And just keep that on the note for the next workshop. I know they identified the quarries and we weren't one of them, but there's something funny about the whole thing.
Yep, I'm happy to take that
Again, we'll
on
take
notice
that on
and
notice.
address that at a workshop.
Yeah.
No worries, Councillor Dugas.
Because it could involve wind, I mean, if he puts that statewide or names other shires, even though it talks about quarries, it could involve wind farms.
Okay, thanks. Yep, we'll check that out for the next workshop. With no further questions, I'll declare the meeting closed at 4:22 p.m. Thank you.